I'm Janelle James, and today I will be interviewing Jane Greenway, Senior Parks and Land Management Coordinator, about the Deer Management Program in Meridian Township.
Thank you.
Question number one, what is the Deer Management Program?
So our deer management program is a volunteer program in Meridian Township, and this is our 10th year. And we are trying to reduce the numbers of deer in our township because we have a problem with overpopulation. And that has resulted in a high number of deer car collisions and a lot of damage to our natural ecosystems. For example, the oak seedlings aren't really able to regenerate because the deer are overbrowsing. And we also get a lot of calls from residents with reports of property damage in the form of landscaping and car accidents. So the residents complained for years and years. And then 10 years ago, the township board tasked our Parks and Recreation Department with coming up with a deer management plan to reduce the numbers.
Question number two, does the Deer Management Program improve the overpopulation of deer?
Well, we think that there's some areas of Meridian Township that have been helped because of the Meridian Deer Management Program, but there's a lot of other areas that haven't seen any difference. And in fact, they're seeing more deer. And Michigan State University started a study about 5 years ago where they were studying the spatial distribution of suburban deer. And what they have learned basically is that the deer don't travel very far. And they call it the rose petal analogy. And so the mom stays in the middle, like in the middle of the rose petal, and the other females, the aunts and the daughters, all stay around her. So the bucks run around, the male deers go for pretty far, but the females don't. They only travel about a quarter of a mile from where they live. And we know that because MSU put collars on them for a few years and analyzed their movement, their patterns. And so what that means is that we have deer. A lot of our neighborhoods in Meridian Township have thick vegetated areas and live next to woods. So the deer are living, reproducing, everything in these little fragmented vegetated areas. And those deer aren't necessarily traveling to the areas where we are hunting, to our parks and land preserves. So unfortunately, there's a lot of residents who aren't really seeing any type of relief from the deer management program.
What is the process to become a hunter?
Oh, right. Okay. So to be a part of the Meridian Township Deer Management Program, you have to be a Meridian Township resident or a Meridian Township employee. And you have to fill out a waiver and release and agree to all of our rules. We take everyone to the MSU Archery Center, and they go through a safety training and an equipment check and a proficiency test. So we do a lot of legwork, making sure that we have people who are being safe and responsible, taking humane shots, and doing the best job that they can for this program. Our biggest message to the hunters is safety for themselves and for the residents. So obviously nothing is more important than the people's safety. And so far, we haven't had any issues. Our hunters, for the most parts, it's all archery, and they're up in elevated tree stands shooting down. So it's very safe. Our 2,000 acres of parks and land preserves remain open for the entire deer season.
Now, why is only archery hunting allowed?
When we started the program 10 years ago, we did have one property where we allowed firearms, and it was a property that's not near a lot of houses. And then we went to just all archery for the rest of the program. And the reason that we do all archery is because you don't hear gunshots, and we think that residents are just simply more comfortable with archery than with firearms.
What are some of the safety precautions in place to protect residents from going into the restricted areas?
So, all of our 2,000 acres of parks and land preserves remain open during archery season, but we do post trailheads with orange signs that say that please be advised, deer hunting is going on. But the truth is that the hunters they really strive to not be seen. Um, and they're well off the trails. And someone particularly walking their dog off leash, disturbs the hunters far more than the hunters disturb the people. Usually people don't even know that they're there. And because they're shooting from elevated tree stands, the arrows are going down. The hunters have to be, they're very, very close, like 20, maybe 10 to 20 yards away when they take a shot. And they tell me that you can basically count the hair on the deer. So sometimes residents call and they are worried, like, can I still go for a walk in the park? Can I walk my dog? I don't want my dog to get shot by mistake. But we understand that people are concerned, but that's really it's just not a problem, because the deer hunters are so close to the deer when they take shots. So we feel that it's a safe activity in our parks and preserves.
Are hunters assigned one area of the 2,000 acres, or can they go to all 40?
So each hunter is assigned to a specific property, and then they come to us, and they have to mark where their tree stand is on that map. And so that no one's walking around just hunting. They're in one location. We know where they are. They have to check in and out with us every day so that we know exactly who is in the woods at any given moment. And it's been such a benefit to us, because our hunters will pick up trash while they're out there. They report things like, maybe an illegal bonfire. They just really are our eyes and ears of the properties. And that's been a wonderful side benefit to the program, not to mention that they're having a great time. They really enjoy sitting outside, especially this time of the year in the fall when the trees are so beautiful. I think that they just, I say it's like the ultimate COVID activity. They don't want anybody around them. They just like sitting there quietly. And it's just wonderful that Meridian Township can provide such an opportunity for outdoor recreation.
Now, I know there are 75 participants in the program this year. Are there 2 or 3 people assigned to one area?
So we have 2,000 acres of property, 40, which are 40 properties that cover 2,000 acres, and there's 75 hunters. And so there's typically 2 to 4 hunters per property. And it just depends on the property, because even though a property might look large, it might be wet or just really thick with undergrowth. So it may only accommodate 1 hunter. And other properties might have like 5 hunters assigned to them. And the reason that we do that is because not everyone is going to be hunting at any given moment. Pretty much everyone in the program works, they have families. It's not a full-time job, it's a volunteer program. And so they share tree stands. Like if someone's going to be out of town for a week or something like that, they kind of share stands. So we try to get as much coverage as we can, but the hunters aren't allowed to use bait to attract the deer. So there's a lot that goes into deer hunting in terms of scouting the properties and watching natural deer patterns and where are they moving and where are they sleeping and walking. So it's not like a lot of people think it's just like shooting fish in a barrel, because they see so many deer around Meridian Township when you drive through the neighborhoods. But the deer are very smart, and they hear a lot and they see a lot. And if they see the hunter, they run, or are, and it seems funny to us who just see all these deer standing around, and you drive your car by and they're like 10 feet away from you just looking at you. But it's actually not that easy. to harvest them when you are out in the woods. They're smart animals. I think typically the deer are most active kind of at dusk and dawn. And so that's when the hunters like to sit and wait. And then the hunters tell me that during the rut, which is when the male deer are kind of chasing the female deer, which is more like mid-October or end of October to mid-November. It depends on the moons and different things. That then the deer are more active during the day because the bucks are chasing the does basically. But so for the most part, but the hunters are really more interested in being out first thing in the morning and kind of at the end of the day.
Have there been any deer related reports this year?
No, in our 10 years of doing this program, we haven't had any accidents be reported to us. It's all been pretty successful. Unfortunately, when you are bow hunting, our big push is for people to always take good shots, and that's for the point of being humane. With bow hunting, the bow goes into the deer, and then the deer doesn't drop automatically. They might run a ways. And unfortunately, there have been a few cases over the years of someone taking a shot and them not being able to find the deer after they track it for a few hours. And that's a very sad and unfortunate thing to happen. Sometimes the deer is later found and it is dead, and the hunter just couldn't find it. But we really kind of drive home the fact that we don't want any injured deer running around because of our hunters. That's not the kind of program we're running here.
After they find the deer, it died. What do they do with it afterwards?
So the hunter, after when they take a shot, they usually sit in their stand for a while, sometimes like an hour or longer, and they let the deer, they don't, if they get right down and the deer isn't totally dead or they can't find it, they don't want it to move farther. They want it to kind of drop. So once they kill the deer, they do what's called field dressing, which is where they basically gut the deer, and they do that in the field, and they bury the guts, and then they drag the deer out, put it in their vehicle. And this year, something that we have that's new is a deer cooler. And it's a large walk-in cooler that we have behind the Meridian Service Center in Nancy Moore Park. So if the hunters don't have a place at home to hang their deer, or until they can get it to a deer processor, they're able to bring it to the cooler and keep it here. The hunters are required to donate their first deer that they harvest. And so those deer are going to be taken to a processor, and Michigan Sportsmen Against Hunger pays for the processing. So Michigan Sportsmen Against Hunger is a program that does exactly that, pays for processing. And the way that they get their funding is when you buy a fishing or hunting license, you can add $1 on to your license, and that goes to Michigan Sportsmen Against Hunger. So usually it's like $80 to $100 to have a deer processed. A lot of our hunters do it themselves, but we are going to be taking all of these deer to the beef barn in Jackson, which is a deer processor. Michigan Sportsmen Against Hunger pays for the processing. We'll go down to Jackson and pick up the venison, and it will be distributed through the Hazlitt and Okemos Community Church food banks. And there's a strong need for protein for fresh food at food banks. And sometimes the food banks are so desperate for protein, like if chickens are just on sale at Meijer's, they'll actually go buy food, but they're always in need of fresh produce and meat. And so the venison is a very popular thing to have at the food banks. And if you go to really expensive restaurants, venison will be like the most expensive thing on the menu, which we always think is funny because it's a really great lean meat. And so it's a great side benefit of the program that we can also feed the hungry.
Is this your first year doing this program?
When we started 10 years ago, we were donating. The hunters were allowed to keep one deer, and all the rest of the deer were donated, and that was wonderful. Then in 2015, chronic wasting disease was discovered, and it was discovered here in Meridian Township. Was the first place in the state of Michigan to discover chronic wasting disease, and that's a terrible, terrible disease that has the potential to wipe out the deer population, which would damage $1 billion industry, basically, which is hunting, and kill the deer. So when that happened, we did not donate the venison anymore because it wasn't determined that it was safe to eat the meat. So when we went through the few years of chronic wasting disease, we required the hunters to submit the deer for testing. They would cut out their lymph nodes and test them at Michigan State University at the USDA lab. And then they would get the results back and find out it was safe to eat. Also during that time period from about 2015 to 2017, the DNR had sharpshooters in Meridian Township harvesting deer, and they did find more cases of chronic wasting disease. But fortunately, no cases have been found since 2016, and none of the deer that our hunters harvested ever were found to have chronic wasting disease. So now it's 2020, so we're 4 years later. We've had 4 years without a case. We feel safe now about donating the meat to the hungry.
Even though you feel safe, do you still take out the lymph nodes and send it to MSU, or do you feel safe enough to do as you normally do?
We feel safe. The DNR has advised us and Michigan Sportsmen Against Hunger that it's safe enough to do what we do now. And the DNR isn't even doing testing anymore, except for a few days during firearm season. So they've moved on to other counties, I think Montcalm, so in the western part of Michigan. They're still finding cases of chronic wasting disease, also 1 or 2 counties in the Upper Peninsula. So they're focusing their testing efforts and expenses on those counties instead to try to get ahead of the disease.
Now, I want to circle back to one of the earlier questions I asked you, which was the overpopulation of deer. You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
that some areas haven't seen a real change because the deer aren't really moving, especially the female deer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that maybe in the coming years you would extend the program so maybe those areas where there's no improvement of the overpopulation of deer, maybe it will improve if the program is extended?
Well, we have Meridian Township has placed a hunter in really any township property, and even some private properties that are safe and practical for hunting. And there's just some areas that are too small and too densely developed with residences, so we just can't get someone in there. And so I don't think that we will be able to expand our program much more, but that is why the police department is going to come in January and harvest some of those deer with specialized equipment that's safe. And the police are able to get into smaller areas. They're able to bait because they're managing the deer. And so we're hoping that those efforts will help those people who have been suffering from those nuisance deer for so many years.
Well, that is all the questions I have. Do you have anything else you would like to add?
I don't think so, Janelle.
Thank you, Jane Greenway, for joining me for this interview today. For more information about the Deer Management Program, you can visit HOMTV.net.